जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी जय गोपी जनवल्लभा गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजन यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजन यमुनातीरावनचारी यमुनातीरावनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी जय गोपी जनवल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानंदन व्रजजनरंजन यमुनातीरावनचारी जय राधा माधव कुंज बिहारी श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। समवेत भक्तवृंद की जय। ग्रंथराज श्रीमद् भागवतम की जय। Hare Krishna. So we are reading from Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 6, Chapter 4. Our focus for today will be on text number 12. Chapter 4 of 6th Canto is titled as the Hamsa Guhya Prayers. The Hamsa Guhya Prayers. So text 12 goes as follows. Tokanam pitarau bandhu drisha pakshmastriya patihi patihi prajanam bhikshunam Patihi prajanam bhikshunam grihi ajnanam buddha shuhrit tokanam pitarau bandhu drishah pakshmastriya patihi pati prajanam bhikshunam grihyajnanam buddha shuhrit tokanam pitarau bandhu drishah pakshmastriya patihi patihi prajanam bhikshunam Grihyajnanam buddha shuhrit Lokanam pitarau bandhu Drishapakshmastriyapatihi Patihi prajanam bhikshunam Grihi ajnanam buddha shuhrat. Mataji's, okay. Lokanam pitarau bandhu Drishah pakshmastriyapatihi Patihi prajanam bhikshunam Grihi ajnanam buddha shuhrat. Lokanam pitarau bandhu Drishapakshmastriyapatihi Patihi prajanam bhikshunam Grihi ajnanam buddha shuhrat. Tokanam, of children. Pitaro, the two parents. Bandhu, the friends. Drishah, of the eye. Pakshma, the eyelid. Striyah, of the woman. Patihi, the husband. Patihi, the protector. Prajanam, of the subjects. Bhikshunam, of the beggars. Grihi, the householder. Ajnanam, of the ignorant. Buddha, the learned. Suhrit, the friend. Translation. As the father and mother are the friends and maintainers of their children, as the father and mother are the friends and maintainers of their children, as the eyelid is the protector of the eye, as the husband is the maintainer and protector of a woman, as the householder is the maintainer and protector of beggars, and as the learned is the friend of the ignorant, so the king is the protector and giver of life to all his subjects. The trees are also subjects of the king. The trees are also subjects of the king. Therefore, they should be given protection. Purport by Srila Prabhupada ki Jai. By the supreme will of the personality of Godhead, there are various protectors and maintainers for helpless living creatures and helpless living entities. The trees are also considered prajas, subjects of the king, and therefore the duty of the monarch is to protect even the trees, not to speak of others. The king is duty bound to protect the living entities in his kingdom. Thus, although the parents are directly responsible for the protection and maintenance of their children, the duty of the king is to see that all parents do their duty properly. Similarly, the king is also responsible for overseeing the other protectors mentioned in this verse. It may also be noted that the beggars who should be maintained by the householders are not professional beggars, but sannyasis and brahmanas, to whom the householders should supply food and clothing. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tatho Jayamudhirayet Nashtaprayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavatir Naishtiki Krishnaya Vasudevaya Devaki Nandanaya Cha Nandagopa Kumaraya Govindaya Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So, this is the Canto 6, Chapter 4, which is called as the Hamsa Guhya Prayers, and our focus for today will be on text number 12. As the father and mother are the friends and maintainers of their children, as the eyelid is the protector of the eye, as the husband is the maintainer and protector of the woman, as the householder is the maintainer and protector of beggars, and as the learned is the friend of the ignorant, so the king is the protector and giver of life to all the subjects. The trees are also subjects of the king, therefore they should also be given protection. So, a quick context of what events have led up to this verse. What is the situation at this point in time in the Śrīmad Bhāgavatam journey? Conversation between Maharaj Parikshit and Sukadeva Goswami is continuing. We saw a lot of discussions around the structure of the universe in the previous canto. So one is that the structure has already been explained by Sukadeva Goswami to Maharaj Parikshit very well. But Maharaj Parikshit also knows that having created all this structure, how did the jivas enter this particular universe? How was it infiltrated with jivas? So Sukadeva Goswami starts narrating this pastime by talking about the 10 sons of Prachina Barhi, who are known as the Prachetas, who have been given the task of placing living entities into this already created Visarga, or material universe, if you like. So, it is said that the Prachetas, the sons of Prachina Barhi, entered into the sea to execute austerities. And they were under the sea for many years. So, as a result, there was no king to rule over the earth. And when there is no ruler, obviously, then there is no order in society. When there is, in the absence of a ruler, there is anarchy. Everything happens spontaneously. There is no design, there is no plan. So, there was no king. Now, because there was no king, the earth appeared to have been neglected. And as a result of that, vegetation, whatever was growing on Mother Earth, was also very spontaneous. There was no order structure to it. There was no plan. Like, I was recently in India, and I saw that buildings come up anywhere. Wherever there is no order. Anywhere buildings are coming up. Like Mayapur, we know that. Mayapur is known very famous for that. Anywhere, wherever there is land, somebody will put a building. Whether there is foundation or no foundation, building is there. And some buildings are like the Leaning Tower of Pisa, right, in Mayapur, right? So therefore there is no order. When there is no proper governance around something, then there is no order, and then there is chaos. So many weeds and unnecessary trees had grown, and there was no organized system of producing food grains. So and the land had become forest. Forest is good, but there was no plan. It was just forest which was just growing wherever it was growing. Now when the Prachetas came out, they had a choice. They had a choice to exercise their leadership qualities and to bring order into this chaos. They had that choice. However, they had another choice, to become angry at the way situation was. Which choice did they exercise? Unfortunately, the latter choice. Rather than being proactive, they became reactive to the situation, which is not the quality of a leader. So, Prachetas came out angry at the trees and they started destroying all the trees. It's like when you are angry, the first person you see, you want to unleash your anger on them. And if it happens to be your boss at office, you can't afford to do it. Therefore, but at home, we can unleash our anger at our wife and children, right? Because they won't say anything, right? Out of affection for us, and they can tolerate us. So therefore, usually we unleash our anger on our people who love us most, right? And we don't unleash our anger on the people who we dislike most, right? So Prachetas came out angry. They were not able to control their anger. So they saw all these trees were grown. They said, okay, let us cut down these trees now. The trees were the object of all their anger at this point in time. And in order to do this mass destruction, they created wind and they ushered in fire to burn down all the trees to ashes. So obviously there has to be someone who has to come to control this whole situation. So the demigods are there who have been given the responsibility of maintaining order in society. So a specific demigod in context, namely the Soma, who is the king of the moon. Why moon specifically? Because moon is responsible for vegetation, right? So therefore, he intervened and he came and told the Prachetas, hang on, why are you doing this chaos here? And as a part of that message, he is giving so many beautiful instructions to Prachetas on true leadership and responsible leadership. As a part of that conversation, he tells the Prachetas, my dear Prachetas, what is your job? Why do you exist? Why have you been created? You have been created because you are Prajapatis. The job of a Prajapati is to protect and sustain living entities in this universe, material universe. Now, in order for living entities to sustain, food and vegetation is the most basic need of human beings. If you are attacking the very root of whatever you want to create and whatever is your goal, then you are acting at cross purposes to your own objective. So then what is the point in unleashing your anger in such a way that you are destroying that itself which you are meant to sustain, right? So please therefore understand the goal of why you have been given this leadership role. First and foremost, control your anger. Control your anger. For if you don't control your anger, then your anger can come in the way of execution of your duties. So, in that context, today's verse is being said. As the father and mother are the friends and maintainers of the children, as the eyelid is the protector of the eye, and the husband is the maintainer and protector of a woman, as the householder is the maintainer and protector of beggars, as the learned is the friend of the ignorant, so the king is the protector and giver of life to all the subjects. The trees are also subjects of the king, therefore they should be given protection. So he is reiterating this message of leadership. The job of a leader is to protect and maintain. Now, Srila Prabhupada opens his purport by saying that the Supreme Personality of Godhead has designed a system of protection and maintenance for all jivas anyway. So we don't need to create anything. He has already designed the systems, right? Now, it is not difficult to see this. One doesn't have to study the Bhagavad Gita to understand this. A common observation on the outside, and we will know that the sky is there to protect the birds. If you see National Geographic, when that tiger comes to eat the bird or whatever, the carnivorous animal comes to eat the bird, what does it do? It immediately flies. If there were no sky, where will it go? Right? So there is an automatic system of wings and there is sky, so it can escape. Right? So there is a system of protection given to birds. There is water which is protecting the fishes today. The earth is protecting the trees. Now, as much as the earth is protecting the trees are also protecting other living entities by giving them shade, right? Resting place. From damaging sunlight, from rain, by offering fruits, flowers, and vegetables for maintenance. So trees receive protection from another aspect of Mother Nature, and trees also in turn give protection. So in that sense, there is a very beautiful interdependence within Mother Nature. If you look within, if you look outside, obviously you can see all these things, but if you look within our body also, we have been given an immune system for our own protection. No company, no scientist has designed it. It has automatically been designed by the Lord Himself. The liver is there, which is meant for detoxification. It is already designed for us, for detox, right? Then a womb is given within the body of a woman in order to protect the child before the child is delivered. So someone who doesn't even understand the Bhagavad Gita, nobody needs to read the scriptures. If we just connect and look back at Mother Nature, we will see an intelligent design that is already existing. One organ serves the other organ. When I went to hospital recently in Mumbai for my father, I was told that there is multi-organ failure, and the doctor was explaining how the lungs, the heart, the kidneys, everything works in coordination. If one goes for a toss, very quickly the others go for a toss, like that. So there is a beautiful design, there is a beautiful order. So this is so much for the gross things which we can perceive. But for maintaining order in society, the Lord also designed Varnashrama Dharma. He has designed Varnashrama Dharma. He says, what is that famous verse? Chatur Varnam Maya Shrishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha. I have created this Varnashrama system. As a part of this Varnashrama system, He created the Kshatriya class, specifically the administrative class and the warrior class. Why? For the protection of all other Varnashram ashramas. They have to protect the Brahminical layer, and they have to also protect the other layers, the Vaishya as well as the Shudra layer. And the Lord also enjoined that the Brahmanas will protect the Kshatriyas, because the Kshatriyas will have to be under the guidance, be guided by the Brahmanas. And for the protection of the Brahmanas, the Lord personally takes charge and He gives the scriptures, Guru, Sadhu and Shastra. Therefore the Brahmanas do Adhyayanam of the Shastra. They do study of the Shastras. So like that, there is a beautiful design that is there. Now the Pracheta's job is to take advantage of this already existing landscape created by God, and to just do their job as Prajapatis, to just use this energy, and all the knowledge is also given to them, right? So the Lord has made all these provisions for mankind. So a living entity in that sense need not create anything, and we don't have to reinvent the wheel. The simple ask of the leaders of society is to simply sustain whatever the Lord has already created and not make it worse. And that also we are not able to do today, right? That itself is a struggle for who? For human beings. Somebody was asking, which is the most dangerous creature on the planet in National Geographic? Who is the most dangerous creature? Not the lion, not the tiger. The most dangerous creature is who? Human beings. We are the most dangerous creatures, because the animals do act absolutely in accordance with the laws of nature. A tiger will not eat vada pav, right, or pani puri, right? Right? Similarly, a cow will never eat, meat. So it is only human beings who have been given the power of discrimination. So we have a free will to choose what we want to do, right? And because we have been given this higher intelligence which animals do not have, therefore it is only human beings who can be leaders of society. We have never seen an election where a tiger is appointed, in a democratic government. I vote for the tiger. Of course, political parties are named as tigers, but a tiger will not be given a vote, right? They will put a picture of a tiger and then they will rule, right? In Maharashtra it happens specifically. There is a tiger behind. and then there is a political party which is ruling, right? So animals cannot be leaders. Animals cannot be leaders. Only human beings who have to take this ownership of leadership in society. Now, there are several aspects of successful leadership in society. The first and foremost aspect is, what are the values of a leader? What are the core values and principles that a leader can even give his life for? Those are called as the shared values in society. And if those values collapse, then everything else collapses. Then no matter whatever you build, like if a foundation is weak, then whatever skyscraper you build on it, you may build, modular kitchen, and you may put the best of paints, wallpapers, false ceilings, Jaguar taps, but everything is going to collapse because the foundation is weak. So we see that today the foundation in terms of values and principles, shared values, common principle society, that is weak, and that's why we see problems in leadership. So there are two aspects. There are two definitions which we learn in leadership. One is efficient leadership and effective leadership. Efficiency is about doing things rightly. Efficiency is about doing things rightly, whereas effectiveness is about doing the right things. So I can drive very beautifully towards Sydney, following all the rules and regulations in a beautiful car, and people will call me also as a very good driver, Prabhuji, you are very safe driver. But unfortunately, I forgot that I had to go to Perth. So very efficiently I am driving, very fuel efficient way of pumping the pedal, but going in the wrong direction. So not effective. So efficiency without effectiveness is useless. So to be effective, the shared values and principles are important. And what are those shared values and principles? Prayojana Jnana, Sambandha Jnana, and Abhideya Jnana. These three things are important. The goal of life has to be absolutely clear. If the goal of life is not clear, then the basic principle of whatever you are trying to build everything on is very weak. So, what is the goal of life? The Śrīmad Bhāgavatam clearly says, Savai pumsam paro dharma yato bhaktir adokshaje ahaituki apratihata yayatma suprisadati. The goal of life is to purify our consciousness and to develop unalloyed love for the Lord. So, whatever activities that we do have to be pleasing to the Lord. And every system in this world has to be designed towards that objective. Ata pumbir dvijashreshtas varnashrama vibhagashaha sa anushtistasya dharmasya samasiddhir haritoshanam. If the Lord is not pleased, whatever we do, big things that we do, is of no use, and it will not bring in auspiciousness. Secondly, sambandha jnana has to be there. The goal of life has to be known, but we also have to know, who am I, who is Bhagavan, what is my relationship to the Lord, and what is the relationship of this ecosystem with the Lord, and what is my relationship with the ecosystem. All these interconnections have to be appreciated. Because nature has been created with a beautiful symbiotic relationship where there is a beautiful interdependence of every jiva on the other jivas. So, if the core principle of peaceful coexistence based on the goal of life, not peace just for the sake of peace, but peace which is conducive to realizing the goal of life, if that is there, then there will be no problem in society. So, Sambandha Jnana itself says that all living entities are parts and parcels, which it doesn't only say human beings are part and parcels of God. So, if one understands all living entities are parts and parcels of God, then one will truly understand the meaning of praja. And then, when one understands that, one will also understand that the trees are also part and parcels, the animals are also part and parcels of the Lord. So, that requires knowledge. And then, obviously, Abhideya. Abhideya means, okay, I understand who I am, I understand who is Lord, I understand that attaining Him is the goal of life. Now, what do I do to attain that goal? That is called as Abhideya. Now, it is not just enough to teach Abhideya. It is required that the government, the leadership facilitates the praja in Abhideya, in following, in realizing the goal of life by following proper practices. So, if that support is not there from the government, then praja can't practice devotional service. Praja can't execute its duties. So, any form of governance in society must facilitate and encourage the goal of life and practices that are required to realize the goal of life. Otherwise, it is not real governance. And for that, the shared values and principles have to be in place. Now, if the shared values and principles are in place and the leadership is already enlightened with the shared values, automatically what will happen? The strategy which they put, the blueprint which they lay out for social governance will reflect. That blueprint will reflect the understanding of those core values. So all those strategic decisions, if they are based on these universal principles of love and brotherhood and of being part and parcel of the Lord, then we can see peaceful coexistence and cooperation in society. Otherwise, what will happen? We will see that these strategies become nuisance. Political strategy will become a nuisance. Defense strategy will become a nuisance, right? Environmental strategy, fiscal strategy. There are so many strategies which is created. Social welfare schemes. Everything becomes nuisance if they do not facilitate the jivas in attaining the goal of life. Sometimes we see that these strategies are they just encourage people to enjoy life more without regard to Shastric injunctions, without a sense of responsibility. So such strategy is of no use. At best, it may help some leaders be in power for some time, but eventually it will destroy the very fabric of mankind. So there is shared values, then there is strategy, then structure. There has to be a structure in society. What is that structure? That structure is Varnashrama Dharma, the structure of Varnashrama Dharma, which has been created, because not all human beings are ready to accept the highest instructions given by Lord Chaitanya and come to the platform of Radha Bhav. Right? People have to be given time for gradual purification. And therefore, the Varnashrama Dharma system has been created so that people can gradually, from wherever they are, they can gradually progress towards that highest goal or towards that highest milestone in spiritual life. And these classifications are also not based on birth. In India, we see every time I go to India, this time also I saw that people are increasingly being divided on the lines of caste, language. And if you see, the boundaries also within India are changing all the time. Earlier there was Andhra Pradesh, now it is Telangana and this and that. So everything is becoming very divisive in its nature, right? And the political leadership is also fueling that divide. So the structure has to be based on guna and karma, based on aptitudes of people. Everyone has to do some kind of an occupation to survive. Rarely is that soul who can chant attentively when one is jobless. Very few people can do that, right? The moment you lose job, when there is a big financial problem, usually when we chant, we think of our finances. We can't think of Krishna with love, with feeling. We can't chant with feeling. Our whole, most of the time when we sit for chanting, what comes to mind is our concerns. There could be a health concern, there could be financial concern. So all these concerns start coming in our mind. So therefore, if the leadership does not facilitate addressal of basic issues in society, people will not be able to sit peacefully and practice devotional life. Of course, the ownership is not only on the leaders, the ownership is on us also. But since the theme today is leadership, we are talking it from the point of view of the leaders. Then there have to be, structure is simply not enough. There have to be systems in society for proper governance. It is a duty of these leaders to establish proper systems, policies and procedures for effective governance. Now, having taken birth in this material world, every living entity has a duty towards Bhagavan, towards God. So, these governmental policies should be such that they facilitate and do not come in the way of living entities executing their duties towards God. There are a lot of duties we have. So, we have duties towards our profession, we have duties towards our family, and we have our highest duty, which is duty unto God. So, all systems in society should facilitate performance of these duties and not come in the way. Another important aspect of governance and leadership is the style which one adopts in leadership. So, the Shastras, whatever the Shastras enjoined many years back, modern day management schools are also teaching the same thing. Today they talk about inverted pyramid. What is inverted pyramid? Earlier the boss used to show himself right on top. But today it's arrogance to show like that. Okay. So today what we do, the boss is right at the bottom and then the structure is there, or they put some horizontal structure like that, right? Many times you see this inverted pyramid. And actually that is correct, because the essence of leadership is servant leadership. Now, leadership is a big responsibility. It's a big responsibility. Leadership is synonymous with service. But unfortunately, leadership today is seen merely as a position of power and status. Because when one becomes a leader, one gets some powers. Especially if one becomes a leader for the first time, he or she becomes so besotted with the power and position that comes with it that they forget the duty. And then what happens? So their inherent, the good nature that they had, also they come under the mode of passion and ignorance. And we see that their style is pretty condescending towards whoever's they are responsible for. Whereas as a leader matures, a leader understands that he is dependent on others for outcomes. And when you understand that dependence, when we understand and respect the fact that everyone contributes to a particular outcome, even though I am the leader, I am extremely dependent on them for their outcome, then one starts really thinking inside and truly understands that yes, my job as a leader is to simply bring the best out of my subordinates. Similarly, the leader of society has to bring out the best in the smaller leaders who handle smaller portfolios. And then those leaders again have smaller leaders. So that is how the values of leadership percolates right from top. So a true leader adopts servant leadership and facilitates growth. Now, servant leadership does not mean that a leader becomes so docile that people sit on his head and then take him for granted. So that is not servant leadership. Servant leadership is the core understanding that my job is to facilitate people. Now, in order to facilitate positive outcomes in society, a mature leader understands and is able to balance the right level of aggression and the right level of compassion. If you see, mature leaders are able to balance this very nicely. So, the famous, I think it was a tennis player, right? Peter Burwash. Was he a tennis player? Right. In Prabhupada's books, we all often find Peter Burwash. He was a very famous personality, right? So, I was hearing in a class that Prabhupada was always insisting on everyone chanting 16 rounds, minimum 16 rounds, right? So, some great personalities, one of them being Peter Burwash, he actually was sitting in a car with Prabhupada. And he asked Prabhupada, would you not give me initiation if I don't chant 16 rounds? I'm actually chanting 4 rounds right now. Will you not give me initiation? So what did Prabhupada say? He said, no, I will not give you initiation. Prabhupada did not say, oh, this is a very famous personality. He will be so useful to me in terms of generating funds for the movement. No. So where it came to essential principles, there was no compromise on that. Why? Not because Prabhupada wanted to, impose on him 16 rounds, but Prabhupada was compassionate. He knew that if one does not come to a minimum level of chanting, then how will transformation happen in his consciousness? So Prabhupada was more concerned about Peter Burwash than maintaining his own leadership, retaining his own leadership by being a good man to Peter Burwash and being a very, user-friendly leader who caters to everyone, saying yes, yes. Today we see the predominance, we see that many of these user-friendly leaders are coming to power because they are telling people what people want to hear. And therefore you will see them on television, often speaking things which are very nice. People like to hear and they also talk about all those things only. But we can clearly see that their goal is not to lead people towards what is good for them. But the goal is rather, how can I become more and more popular? How can I get more TRP ratings when I speak? So a true leader does not worry about his own image. A true leader truly works for welfare of society. Loka hitam. Now, in his book, Spiritual Warrior, His Holiness Bhaktivedanta Swami also elaborates on a lot of essential qualities of a leader. So I'll just talk about some of that which you can come across in his book. First and foremost, Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj said, the first quality of, if someone has to be a leader, he should be in control of his own senses. Sense control, right? Without sense control, nobody can be the leader. Because the first conquest of a leader is to conquer his own senses. Otherwise, externally you can conquer so many things. But if you have not conquered your own mind, your mind is always going to disturb you. So that is the first conquest of a of a leader. So an example is given of a Chinese warrior. The Chinese warriors. So this Chinese warrior, he was very adept at martial arts. So he went to a saintly person, and he demanded that saint come out. He demanded the saint to come out. The saint refused to come out. And the Chinese, he could not, because obviously his false ego was very high at that point in time, and that led to anger. How come, I am such a big warrior, how come this puny personality, this saint, is not listening to my instructions and coming out when I say? Because these warriors are used to people dancing at their instructions. So the saint did not come out. So he told the servant of the saint, go and tell that saint that the controller has come. Right? The controller, whatever that region, whatever you may call it as, that the controller has come. So the saint from inside told the warrior that you are not a leader, you are a butcher. Why? Control, you don't know what is the basic principle of control. You want to kill people who do not listen to your instructions. So therefore, how can you call yourself as controller? Because you cannot even control your own arrogance and anger. You are a servant of your own mind. You are a servant of your senses. You are not in control of yourself. How can you call yourself as controller? Like that. So, obviously, this story gives certain basic principles. But for me personally, the best example of how to be a controller is given in Nectar of Instruction, in the very first verse. Vacho vegam, manasa krodha vegam, jiva vegam, udara upashta vegam. Etan vegan yo vishaheta dhiraha, sarvam apimam prithvim sa shishyat. So Rupa Goswami gives us the blueprint. Vacho vegam. A real controller is one who can control whatever he speaks. Vacha. Manasa, who can control his mind. Krodha, who can control his anger. Vacho vegam, manasa krodha vegam, jivha vegam, who can control what he eats and what he does not eat. Udara upashta vegam, who can control the belly as well as the genitals. Such a person can be called as a controller. But today, if we see who are the controllers of society, the politicians. So I was hearing somewhere that the president of Zaire, now the Zaire is, we all know it's somewhere in Africa, right? And Africa is known to be amongst the poorest of nations. And this Zaire specifically is, amongst all those people, they are number one in being poor, right? Very, very poor country. It is said that the president of the poorest country in Africa was amongst the wealthiest persons in the world. Now it is, clearly there is something wrong here, right? So this is leadership. Not to speak of the presidents of the United States. One of the former presidents of the United States, he spent $40 million only on his own case, where he was made accountable by the people for abusing a woman. $40 million was just spent in trying to just retain to come out of his case, like that. So obviously these leaders don't have any control over their senses, nor they have any knowledge of how to govern society. So Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaj talks about this first quality of sense control in a leader. Secondly, he talks about education. Leaders have to be educated. In what? Not just material education. They have to be educated they have to have knowledge of the scriptures. In Bhagavad Gita 16.9, there is a beautiful verse. It says, I'll read a Sanskrit first and then the translation. Etam drishtim avastabhya nashtatmano alpa buddhayah prabhavanti ugra karmanah shayaya jagato hitah. Following such conclusions, this is from the divine and demonic natures. Following such conclusions, the demonic who are lost to themselves and who have no intelligence, they engage in unbeneficial, horrible works meant to destroy the world. So, we see this happening in today's society. Someone today may have the ability to rule the world, but mere ability is not enough. Ability has to be backed by right education, and education has to lead to right values. For example, we have the 12 aims of Shastric study given by Srila Prabhupada, right? What are the 12 aims of Shastric study? We call it as cup fate Mars. Knowledge, understanding, personal application, preaching application. Faith and conviction, authority, theological application, evaluation. Evaluate what is good vis-a-vis what is bad. Evaluate situations. Like that. And then mood and mission. Am I forgetting something? What is the next A? Kupanish Prabhu? Forgot. Huh? Yeah, integrity. Yeah. Responsibility. Shastra Chakshu. Seeing everything through the lens of the Shastras. But you can only see everything through the lens of the Shastras if you have studied the Shastras. Which leader of society has studied the Shastras? So there is no Shastra Chakshu. So how can we expect them to give any kind of spiritual vision and thereafter mission and objectives? It's not possible, right? Bhagavad Gita 16.23 in the same chapter, again the famous verse comes. Yash Shastra Vidhim Utsrijya Vartate Kama Karatah na sa siddhim avapnoti na sukham na param gatim. He who discards scriptural injunctions and acts according to his own whims attains neither perfection nor happiness nor the supreme destination. So, therefore, Bhaktivedanta Maharaj says that they have to be shastrically knowledgeable. Otherwise, there is no, if you don't know where to go, how can you go where you want to go? So, a leader has to have knowledge of the Shastras. But knowledge of the Shastras does not mean that a leader is supposed to be non-violent at all points in time. Sometimes, again, this time I was trying to talk to someone in India about Krishna consciousness, and they were saying, no, very violent. Krishna, you say Krishna is Bhagavan, we cannot accept Krishna, sorry, because, he encouraged battle. This was one of my own relatives who I was trying to. So, he comes from Jainism background. So, he's saying in our Jain, we are non-violent. Obviously, the question is, if your wife were to be disrobed in public, would you be non-violent? Would you pay obeisances to that person and give message of peace? You'll take a gun and whatever is in your hand and you will first try to protect your wife, right? Right? And especially after you have given adequate warnings to that person. Krishna did not unleash the war or did not sanction the war immediately after the Vastaraharan happened. There were a lot of messages which were given after that. After lots of peace attempts, after a lot of good instructions, then there was a war. So, non-violence is not the highest principle in society. Quite the contrary, there has to be violence. But that violence has to be for the purpose of protecting dharma, protecting the religious and annihilating the irreligious after adequate warnings. Right? So, it is not that a leader should not get angry. Now, sometimes what can happen is, when we read this section, especially yesterday, Surya Gopal Prabhu gave a very nice class. Yesterday's theme was on anger, because the Soma, moon god, is talking to the Pracheta, saying that, please do not unleash your anger in this way and destroy the trees. But does it mean that devotees are not supposed to get angry at all? Coincidentally, as much as I was on the roster today for this Bhagavatam class, yesterday in our Bhakti Vaibhav we were dealing with this topic only. What was the context? The context is when the 4 Kumaras enter the spiritual world Vaikuntha and they are being stopped by Jay and Vijay at the 7th gate. So what happens? Immediately the 4 Kumaras get angry, right? They are thinking, these people in Vaikuntha, why is there a need for gatekeepers and gates in Vaikuntha? There is a natural gate that is there. What is the natural gate? The gate of lust, anger, envy, greed and pride. Everyone is trapped. This material world is often told to be a jail which has no gates. Everyone can go outside, but nobody wants to go outside, right? There are no hard gates here. So we are all bound by the three modes of material nature. So the Kumaras are thinking, but there is absence of three modes of material nature in the spiritual world. So what is the need of 7 gates? So obviously, to cut a long story short, obviously we are not diving deep into that section, but the essence of that Prabhupada explains that the Kumaras' anger should not be constituted as material anger. It was their intense eagerness to have darshan of the Lord. The Kumaras graduated from Brahman platform and they had understanding of Paramatma from their Guru and Father Brahmaji. Brahma bhuta prasannatma na sochati na kankshati. Samas sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim lavate param. So therefore, when the 4 Kumaras did live a life of purity, yes, we accept that they were attracted to the impersonal. But it is not that impersonalists are hated by the Lord. Impersonalists just have an affiliation towards his own superior energy, which is called as Brahman. So they are not sinners in any way. So the Lord is very compassionate to the impersonalists, right? So the Lord wanted to extend his mercy. It was the desire of the Lord to give them darshan. And when someone is very eager, and it is also said that these Kumaras were childlike, not childish, but childlike. Now, a child is very spontaneous. A child is not political. Or child doesn't go to a house and ask who is the owner of the house, who is funding all these things. Therefore, what should I play with? Which room can I enter? Which room I cannot enter? Child is very spontaneous. So 4 Kumaras very spontaneous. So when they saw like a child run towards a toy, the 4 Kumaras were running towards Vishnu. And then when they were stopped, they got angry and in their anger they cursed. But the good part was that though they cursed, they became repentant immediately thereafter. That is also mentioned, right? So therefore, Prabhupada writes there, it is not that if a self-realized person will not get angry. Anger is very, very present in the spiritual world also. Even at the highest realms of bhakti, there is anger. How do we know that there is anger? This is known from the Brahmara Gita. If we study the Brahmara Gita section in the 10th canto, the Brahmara Gita is all about Radharani unleashing her anger on Krishna, right? She is blasting that bumblebee. Right? And she doesn't know it is Krishna. And Krishna comes as that bumblebee because he can't come in any other way in front of Radharani at that point in time. He knows she is very upset at him, right? And Radharani is giving left, right, center, and Uddhava is watching all these things. What's going on here, right? I thought I came to give her knowledge of Krishna, but this is at some other platform. Lalita Sakhi is blasting Krishna almost all the time. That is the characteristic of left-wing gopis. Left-wing gopis, again, as we discussed sometime earlier also, left-wing gopis and right-wing gopis, they are different. The right-wing gopis are very submissive. Because what is the mood of right-wing gopis? Krishna, we are yours. When you think Krishna, we are yours, then you subjugate to the Lord's desire. But when you start thinking, Krishna, you are ours. That's the mood of left-wing gopis. So the left-wing gopis cannot share Krishna with anyone else. So they get angry. So Lalita Sakhi gets terribly angry when Krishna is absconding. Like that. So she is unleashing. He says, you don't have any jati, you black man. But Lord says that this chastisement which I am getting from the gopis is much more relishable to me than the Purusha Shuktam which is sung by the Smartha Brahmanas, which glorifies me. This is better, right? So therefore, it is not that anger does not have its place in spirituality. Many times we are also study in the Bhagavatam the anger of a guru towards his disciple. That is also not material anger. So that anger is not conducive, which stems from one's desire for sense gratification. So if one wants to enjoy one's senses and one is inhibited from enjoying, the anger which comes from attachment to one's desire and greed, that anger is material anger. But that anger which is unleashed when one is prevented from executing one's devotional duties is perfectly acceptable even in Vaikuntha. Like that. And that's why the spiritual master gets sometimes angry at the disciple, because the spiritual master is not coming from his own false ego. The spiritual master is committed. If you see in ISKCON, so many sannyasis and even grihasthas, they have dedicated their lives to serve Prabhupada's mission, which is not an easy decision for any one of us to take. Right? So when they get angry, what could be possibly the reason they will get angry? When a person has given his life, and the person doesn't have any bank balances, when the person is roaming from one place to another just to spread Krishna consciousness, what else could be their motive? So if one understands this, then one will also understand that anger has a rightful place. Now why we discuss this is because here we see that the Pracheta's anger was not based on any spiritual mood. The Pracheta's anger was simply, what's going on here? Hang on. We did so many austerities, and when we thought after we coming out of these austerities, everything will be very orderly. But the trees are growing anywhere, the forest, vegetation, there is a lot of chaos. Therefore, how dare this happened? And then they start cutting. Now, this is, so Hiranyakashipu also performed austerities, right? So this is not the mode of the austerities of saintly personalities. This is the mode of almost like Hiranyakashipu's mode of austerities, where because I have performed an austerity, therefore as a reward, the world has to revolve around my opinions and views and everything has to be in order because I did austerity. Just like, for example, sometimes when we do austerities at home, especially the Nirjal, then what happens? Sometimes the blood pressure goes up and the anger wells up towards the evening, right? I am fasting, don't you know? I have a headache, I have a terrible headache, don't irritate right now. Like that, right? So better to eat something, accept our fallen position and be pleasant and spread Krishna consciousness and spread positive vibrations at home. So therefore, that anger which stems from the mode of ignorance is not conducive. Then Bhakti Swami Maharaj goes on to further say that leaders must protect and maintain. Now the job of a leader is not just to give physical protection. That is definitely the job of a leader, no doubt about that. But the job of a leader is to give the highest protection to society. What is the highest risk to society today? That is what begets the highest protection. What is the highest risk? Prabhupada writes that in Bhagavad Gita purport. Neha vikrama nastosti pratvayo na vidyate. Swalpa mapyasya dharmasya trayate mahatabayat. Prabhupada says the highest danger is losing the human form of life. So the job of a leader is to ensure that human beings don't lose their human form of life and fall down into the animal species. So the leader has to facilitate spiritual education amongst the prajas. So, and that is how a leader will fulfill his responsibility towards his citizens, towards the environment, and therefore towards God. Without protection, it is said, in society, sinful tendencies will increase. So where there is no protection, there is a predominance of sin. And we see the example of Vena. Vena was a useless king in one sense. But when Vena was ruling, at least the rogues and ruffians were in control, because Vena was a bigger rogue and ruffian than them. But when Vena was killed and no leader was instituted in his place, what happened? Society went towards anarchy. So it is said that when there is no governance, society will move towards sin. In the Manu Samhita, it is explained what is the standard of protection. Everything has to have a gold standard, no? So the standard of protection, physical protection, the standard of physical protection is explained in Manu Samhita, the law of mankind. It is said, when a woman, when a beautiful woman, a young beautiful woman, who is wearing all expensive ornaments on herself, is standing in a solitary place in the dead of the night, and nothing happens to her by the morning, then that is the standard of protection. That means society is running perfectly. Then the leader is successful if that happens. Either out of values or out of fear of punishment, whichever way, there is order in society. So the leader is successful. This is the gold standard for protection as per Manu Samhita. Now, protection, if I have to protect someone, I need empowerment also to protect someone. I also need to be empowered. So protection needs some power. Usually in society, such powers come through lineage or pedigree, or it comes through acquisition. You forcefully acquire power. Like today we are seeing, right? One leader is trying to forcefully acquire power over another country, like that. So, but leadership which comes out of lineage or acquisition is not enough for successful governance, because such leadership can be frittered away when one comes under the subjugation of the three modes of material nature. You may acquire something, but then you are also subjugated by the three modes, so you may lose it eventually. So it is said that power which comes through austerities is always good. Not the Hiranyakashipu type austerities, which is austerities in the mode of goodness. The power which you get, the spiritual prowess which one acquires by dint of one's sadhana, by dint of one's spiritual practices and austerities thereof, that is good in the long term. Such power is good in the long term for society. Why? Because the premise of such power is purity. And Prabhupada said, purity is the force. What is that purity? That purity is the spiritual prowess which one acquires. So, Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Canto 4, talks about 8 opulences which one can get as a result of one's austerity. And it is said that anyone who has these 8 opulences can rule society very nicely. Now, we see that our spiritual leaders also led by example. For example, when Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, when he wanted to launch himself as a global preacher, and when he knew that I had to weed out Mayavad from this place, then he performed severe austerities, spiritual austerities, to please the Lord and to get the Lord's mercy, to please his spiritual masters and get their blessings. Similarly, it is mentioned that Srila Prabhupada also, before Prabhupada went to the West, he used to go to Advaita Bhavan and chant. And the pujaris there, many people have observed the austerities of Srila Prabhupada before Prabhupada launched himself for his mission in the Western countries. So, protection needs power and power needs austerity. Now, the Prachetas also did austerity, but their austerity was in the mode does not seem to be in the mode of goodness. Because were it to be in the mode of goodness, their approach towards this vegetation and trees would have been different, more proactive rather than reactive. Having acquired power, that power should not be misused. This is another lesson given by Bhakti Tirth Swami Maharaj. And we have seen enough examples in the world of misuse of leadership. We are seeing one currently in the world, which has put the whole world into a big quagmire like that. We have seen Hitler, we have seen Vena, we have seen so many examples. We have seen Hiranyakashipu, we have seen Kamsa, gross misuse of power, despite ability to do a lot of austerities. So it is therefore mentioned that the goal of austerity is to develop purity, to lead a proper movement for Krishna, not to overpower Krishna. Get power so that you can serve the Lord effectively, not with the mood, how can I overpower the Lord or how can I overpower the devotees? That austerity is not fruitful in the long run. Finally, anger management. Anger management or controlled aggression, they are the same thing. There has to be some aggression, otherwise people will sit on our head, as we discussed earlier. Now, accountability is the basic premise behind anger. So, a leader is naturally accountable to his praja. And how do we know that? We have seen in Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, Maharaj Prithu also got very angry. But the anger of Maharaj Prithu was driven by his sense of accountability to his praja. He knew that the earth he wanted to flatten the earth, if you remember that pastime. Earth was not producing food grains. So Maharaj Prithu therefore got angry and he leveled the earth so that it produces food grains. He didn't destroy, but he leveled the earth. So this is accountability. This is anger which comes from a deep sense of accountability to the citizens. Similarly, we see Maharaj Parikshit also, a deep sense of accountability. When the bull was being mistreated by the personification of Kali, he immediately intervened and chastised. So that is aggression, but it is controlled aggression which comes on the platform of accountability. Like that, we will see umpteen examples of leaders who have shown anger for the right purpose. So violence is essential as long as the intentions are clear, which is to protect dharma, and violence which is implemented in accordance with Guru, Sadhu and Shastras, with a pure intent of saving society. So in conclusion of this particular section, today's class of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, we see that the moon god, Soma, he is offering very valuable insights in the preceding verses as well as the subsequent verses into different aspects of effective leadership and governance, so that the prachetas can be successful in implementing the vision which the Lord has for society and in their role as true Prajapatis. Thank you. I'll just stop here and ask if any questions or comments. Yes, Prabhu.
Thank you very much for a very nice Jagannath.
Thank you.
Prabhupada also was angry. Amsterdam, there were no flowers. Prabhupada was very angry. Said, how can we do
Yes. And Keshav Prabhu was also mentioning in our Bhakti Sarvabhauma class last week that Prabhupada used to get angry with his devotees if after training also they were irresponsible. But same Prabhupada there is another side of compassion where he could have easily got angry. So once it was said that there was arti being performed, and when like Vrajraj Prabhu, sometimes you take the arti around, right, to everyone, to do this. And when the arti was taken around, one person came over there and he took a cigarette. So, but Prabhupada was shocked, it is said. Keshav Prabhu was saying, Prabhupada was just shocked. What's going on here? Like that. Okay. But obviously because that person was doing out of ignorance, so Prabhupada showed compassion to that person. And today it is said that person is a guru in our movement, right? Same person. So this is, so on one hand, Prabhupada was angry at his disciples who were following, who accepted his authority, but Prabhupada was compassionate to someone who was ignorant of his authority. So it's very subtle in that sense.
discrimination?
Yeah, so Prabhupada could discriminate because Prabhupada's only goal was how can I bring people and keep them inspired in Krishna consciousness. Because that purity was there, then therefore all his decisions and his anger was also directed towards that outcome. Anything else? Yes, Mataji. Very good question. So she's asking, how do we know if, in short, you are asking, how do we know if Krishna is pleased with our actions? Like that. So, again, I'm just re-quoting whatever I have learnt from my seniors. So I have heard from the senior devotees that if our enthusiasm to do bhakti is barkarar means intact, then we know that we are going in the right direction. If we are not pleasing the Lord, usually when is the Lord not pleased? The Lord will never be displeased if we make mistakes. Because He is not expecting perfection from us. He is bhavagrahi, He is not outcome grahi. Right? So but if the mood is improper, even if the outcome is good, He is not pleased. For example, I have made a beautiful flower garland for the Lord. But in making the flower garland, I have placed the wreath of so many dead bodies are there on top of devotees. Right? I have behaved in such a manner with other devotees, such a way that the Lord doesn't even want my flowers, right? Or I have sung a very beautiful kirtan, very properly, music was correct, tal, rag was correct. But the intent of my singing was to show how good a singer I am. So it is the intent behind an activity, the purity of purpose which pleases or displeases the Lord, not the excellence with which that item has done. But that doesn't mean we should not have excellence. But the premise of excellence in services should be purity of purpose. So if that is there, then the Lord is automatically pleased. Now that is the philosophy. The symptom of whether the Lord is pleased or not is in whether what is our level of enthusiasm for devotional service? What is our level of enthusiasm to associate with devotees? Usually we will find that people who commit Vaishnava aparadh, time and again, we will usually find that their taste for devotional life will go down, and therefore their relationships with devotees will also be very poor. And then what happens? When that happens, Prabhupada says in one of the purports to Śrīmad Bhāgavatam in Canto 3, that eventually the Lord thereby facilitates their forgetfulness of Him. So So if we want to measure the barometer of whether Krishna is pleased with us, how often in a day are we remembering the Lord in an anukul manner? How is our relationship with devotees? These are all indicators of whether the Lord is pleased with us or not. So is that, and then, yes, Keshav Prabhu, I remember, once said this in the class, that one of the immediate barometer of whether Krishna is pleased or not is the level of material desires that we have. One of the symptoms of poor sadhana or Vaishnava aparadh is that our material desires, which were very latent, they will all surface. Suddenly you will find that, our attraction to, fancy cars or fancy houses or to wallpapers and whatever, all these things will increase, which means that something is wrong somewhere. Because Prabhupada said, material life and Krishna consciousness go ill together, like that. So these are all the symptoms. Is it okay, Mataji? Thank you. Okay, anything else? Okay. Grantaraj Śrīmad Bhāgavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.